They say reality is what it is, that the world outside is fixed, solid, and indifferent to our gaze. But what if that's the greatest illusion of all? What if the very act of looking, of paying attention, is not just a passive experience, but the most creative force in the universe? Pause for a moment and consider. How many times have you stared at your life, at your circumstances, and felt powerless? How often have you believed that things just are the way they are, that you're a spectator in a movie you didn't direct? This is the story most of us inherit. But beneath the surface of ordinary life, a deeper truth is waiting to be seen, a truth that quantum physics has been whispering for over a century. This is the story of the observer effect. And once you understand it, you'll never see your life or your power the same way again. Let's begin with a simple question. What is the observer effect? In the world of quantum physics, it's the discovery that the act of observation changes the outcome of an experiment. It's not just a metaphor, it's a measurable, repeatable phenomenon. When scientists set up the famous double-slit experiment, they expected particles, tiny bits of matter, to behave like, well, particles. But when no one was watching, those particles acted like waves spreading out, exploring every possible path. The moment a measuring device was introduced, the wave collapsed. The particle chose a single path. The act of observing changed reality itself. But what does this have to do with you, with your daily struggles, your dreams, your disappointments? More than you might imagine. Because the observer effect isn't just about subatomic particles. It's about consciousness. It's about the way your attention, your focus, your very awareness shapes the world you experience. Think about it. Every day, you wake up and look at your life. You check your phone, you scan your bank account, you glance in the mirror. Each of these moments is an act of observation. But what if, in those moments, you're not just seeing what's there, you're helping to create it? What if your gaze is not neutral but magnetic? What if the way you look at your reality is the very thing that locks it into place? This is where the old story begins to crack. Because most of us have been taught to believe that reality is out there, separate from us, unmoved by our attention. But quantum physics tells a different story. It tells us that the universe is not a static backdrop, but a living field of possibilities, an ocean of potential that responds to the observer. Let's return to the double-slit experiment for a moment. Imagine a tiny electron fired toward a barrier with two slits. If no one is watching, the electron behaves like a wave, passing through both slits at once, creating an interference pattern, a signature of infinite possibilities. But the moment a detector is placed to see which slit the electron goes through, the wave collapses. The electron chooses, the pattern changes, the act of looking changes the outcome. Now, zoom out. Imagine your life as that experiment. Every thought you think, every belief you hold, every expectation you carry, these are acts of observation. And every time you look at your circumstances with strong emotion, you collapse a version of reality into your experience. When you look at your finances with fear, your body with shame, your relationships with mistrust, you're not just seeing what's real. You're helping to make it real. You're selecting a timeline that matches the frequency of your observation. This is not blame. This is power. Because if your attention helps shape reality, then changing the quality of your attention changes what's possible. Not because the universe suddenly favors you, but because your observation becomes a match to a new version of what already exists in potential. But here's the catch. Most people are not observing reality. They're projecting it. They see through filters, old wounds, inherited beliefs, cultural programming. They look at the world through the lens of their past, and so the future looks identical. The same loops, the same patterns, the same disappointments, over and over again. So, what does it mean to observe differently? It means to become aware of the lens you're looking through, to notice the emotional charge behind your gaze, to ask, am I seeing through fear or through possibility, through lack or through abundance, through the eyes of my wounded self or my awakened self? This is the first step in reclaiming your creative power, because the observer effect is not just a scientific curiosity, it's a spiritual invitation. It's the universe asking you, how will you look at your life today? Will you stare at your problems until they freeze into permanence? Or will you observe with curiosity, with compassion, with the willingness to see something new? Let's make this practical. Think of a situation in your life that feels stuck. Maybe it's your job, your health, your relationships. Notice how you usually look at it. Do you see it as a problem to be fixed, a burden to be carried, a loop you can't escape? Or can you, just for a moment, observe it with neutrality, with the awareness that your gaze is not just passive, but participatory? This is where the shift begins, because the moment you stop reacting and start witnessing, not from survival, but from sovereignty, you unlock the full power of the observer effect. You collapse reality consciously. You become the architect, not the victim, of your experience. And here's the paradox. The more you try to force reality to change, the more it resists. But the moment you change the way you look at it, the field begins to reorganize, not because you're manipulating the universe, but because you're finally in coherence with the version of reality you desire. So, as we move deeper into this journey, remember, the observer effect is not just about particles in a lab, it's about you. It's about the way you look at your life, your challenges, your dreams. And the moment you change your gaze, you change your world. If you're ready to see with new eyes, type in the comments, I choose to observe with awareness. Let this be your first act of conscious creation. But let's not stop at theory. Let's go deeper into the very heart of what it means to be an observer in a universe that is alive, responsive, and waiting for your signal. You see, the observer effect is not just a scientific anomaly to be admired from a distance. It is the hidden engine behind every transformation, every breakthrough, every moment when your life suddenly shifts in a way you can't explain. It is the reason why two people can walk through the same world and experience completely different realities. One sees obstacles, the other sees opportunities. One feels trapped, the other feels free. The difference is not in the world itself, but in the quality of their observation. Let's pause and ask, what is observation, really? Is it just seeing with your eyes, or is it something deeper, an act of consciousness, a meeting point between your inner world and the field of infinite potential? Science tells us that observation is not passive, it is participatory. The observer and the observed are entangled, woven together in a dance that creates reality moment by moment. This is not just philosophy, it is the foundation of quantum mechanics. In the double-slit experiment, the act of measurement, the simple act of asking, which path did the particle take, collapses the wave of possibility into a single outcome. The universe responds to the question you ask, to the attention you give, to the expectation you hold. In other words, reality is not fixed, it is fluid, dynamic, and deeply personal. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. The observer effect is not limited to the laboratory. It is happening in your life, right now, in ways you may not even realize. Every belief you hold, every story you tell yourself, every assumption you make about what is possible. These are all acts of observation, and each one sends a signal into the field, collapsing a version of reality that matches your dominant frequency. Think about the stories you carry. Maybe you've been told that money is hard to come by, that love is rare, that success is reserved for the lucky few. Maybe you've looked at your circumstances and decided, this is just the way it is. But what if those stories are not just reflections of reality, but blueprints for it? What if your observation is not just a camera, but a projector, casting your inner world onto the screen of your life? This is the secret most people never discover. They spend their lives trying to change the movie, not realizing that the real power lies in changing the lens of perception, the filter of belief, the frequency of attention. These are the true architects of reality. Let's bring this down to earth. Imagine you're facing a challenge, a health issue, a financial setback, a relationship conflict. The old way is to react, to judge, to resist, to see the problem as something out there that needs to be fixed. But the quantum way is different. It invites you to pause, to breathe, to become aware of how you are observing the situation. Are you looking through the eyes of fear or the eyes of possibility? Are you collapsing the same old timeline, or are you open to a new one? This is not about denial or wishful thinking. It's about recognizing that your observation is not neutral. It is creative. It is magnetic. The field responds not to your words, but to your dominant vibration, the emotional signature you bring to each moment. Let's take a closer look at emotion. In the quantum field, emotion is energy in motion. It is the signal you send, the frequency you broadcast. When you observe your life with frustration, you reinforce the pattern of frustration. When you observe with gratitude, you open the door to new possibilities. This is why ancient wisdom and modern science both agree. The quality of your attention determines the quality of your experience. But here's the paradox. The more you try to force a new reality, the more you get stuck in the old one. Because force is rooted in resistance, and resistance is just another form of observation, one that says, I don't want this, but I believe it's real. The field doesn't judge. It simply mirrors your dominant signal. So how do you shift? How do you become a conscious observer rather than an unconscious reactor? It begins with awareness, with the willingness to notice your own gaze, to ask, what am I really looking at? What am I expecting to see? What am I feeling as I observe this moment? This is the practice of conscious observation. It is the art of seeing without judgment, of witnessing without attachment, of holding space for new possibilities to emerge. It is the moment you stop collapsing the same old reality and start selecting a new one. Let's make this even more practical. The next time you find yourself in a loop, repeating the same argument, facing the same setback, feeling the same emotion, pause. Take a breath. Instead of reacting, become the observer. Notice the sensations in your body, the thoughts in your mind, the stories you're telling yourself. Ask, is this the only way to see this? What else is possible here? What would it feel like to observe this with curiosity, with compassion, with openness? This is not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about reclaiming your power to choose how you see. Because the moment you change your observation, the field begins to respond. New ideas arise, unexpected solutions appear, the energy shifts, and so does your reality. But don't just take my word for it. Science is catching up to what mystics have known for centuries. Studies in neuroscience show that the brain is a pattern recognition machine. It filters reality through the lens of expectation, reinforcing what you already believe. But the brain is also plastic, capable of rewiring itself in response to new experiences, new observations, new choices. This is the gift of being human. You are not a prisoner of your past. You are not doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. You are the observer, the chooser, the creator. And every moment is a new opportunity to look again, to see differently, to collapse a new reality into form. So, as you move through your day, remember, the observer effect is not just a theory. It is a living truth. The way you look at your life matters. The quality of your attention shapes the world you experience. And the moment you choose to observe with awareness, you become the architect of your destiny. If this resonates with you, type in the comments, "I am the observer of my reality." Let this be your declaration, your signal to the field, your first step into conscious creation. But let's go even deeper. Because the observer effect is not just a concept to understand, it's a way of living, a new relationship with reality itself. And the more you practice it, the more you'll notice subtle but profound shifts in every area of your life. Let's talk about the loops, the patterns that seem to repeat no matter how hard you try to change them. Maybe it's the same kind of relationship drama, the same financial stress, the same self-doubt that creeps in just when you're about to take a leap. Most people believe these loops are evidence that life is fixed, that fate is unchangeable. But what if these loops are simply the result of unconscious observation? What if you've been collapsing the same version of reality over and over because you keep looking at your life through the same emotional lens? Imagine this. Every morning, you wake up and immediately check your phone, your messages, your bank account. You feel a familiar tension in your chest, a subtle anxiety about the day ahead. You tell yourself, "Here we go again." In that moment, you're not just observing, you're selecting. You're tuning your frequency to the same old channel, and the field responds with more of the same. But what happens if you pause? What happens if, just for a moment, you observe your life with fresh eyes, with curiosity instead of judgment, with gratitude instead of frustration? The field begins to shift. New possibilities emerge, the loop is interrupted, and a new timeline becomes available. This is the real power of the observer effect. It's not about denying your challenges or pretending everything is perfect. It's about becoming aware of the creative role you play in every moment. It's about realizing that your attention is not just a spotlight. It's a paintbrush, coloring the canvas of your life with every thought, every feeling, every expectation. Let's look at another example. Think about a time when you were waiting for a sign from the universe, a number on the clock, a message from a friend, a lucky break. You felt stuck, uncertain, desperate for proof that things could change. But the signs didn't come, or if they did, they felt random, meaningless. Why? Because you were looking outside for confirmation instead of realizing that the real signal was always within you. The quantum field doesn't respond to desperation. It doesn't answer to pressure or impatience. It responds to coherence, to the clarity and alignment of your observation. When you observe your life from a place of trust, of inner knowing, the field mirrors that certainty. Synchronicities multiply, doors open, opportunities align, not as proof you needed, but as celebration of what you already chose. This is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize the power of stillness, of presence, of witnessing. When you become still enough to observe without interference, without the noise of fear, doubt, or control, you create a gap. And in that gap, the field recalibrates, possibilities reopen, energy reorganizes not by force, but by presence. But let's be honest, this is not always easy. The mind is addicted to control, to prediction, to certainty. It wants to know how and when things will change. It wants to see evidence before it believes. But the quantum field doesn't operate by human deadlines. It operates by readiness, by resonance, by the frequency you hold. So how do you train yourself to become a conscious observer? How do you break the habit of unconscious observation and step into your true creative power? It starts with awareness. Begin to notice the moments when you slip into old patterns, when you react instead of respond, when you judge instead of witness, when you collapse into emotion instead of holding space for possibility. These are the moments when your observation is on autopilot, running the old script. The next step is curiosity. Instead of criticizing yourself for falling into the loop, ask, what am I really seeing here? What am I expecting? What would it feel like to observe this with neutrality, with openness, with love? Curiosity is the antidote to judgment. It opens the door to new possibilities. Then comes practice. Every day, set aside a few minutes to observe your life consciously. Sit in silence, breathe deeply, and bring to mind a situation that feels stuck. Notice how you usually look at it. Then, gently shift your gaze. Imagine observing it as if you were already on the other side of the challenge, as if resolution had already arrived. Feel the difference in your body, in your energy, in your outlook. This is not just imagination. It is quantum alignment. The field responds to the frequency of your observation. And finally, trust. Trust that the field is listening. Trust that your attention matters. Trust that every time you choose to observe with awareness, you are collapsing a new reality into form, even if you can't see the evidence right away. Remember, the biggest shifts often happen quietly. One day, you wake up and realize the fear you used to feel is gone. The problem that haunted you now feels irrelevant. The conversation that would have triggered you leaves you unmoved. The shift doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It simply becomes who you are. This is the arrival, the moment when the new timeline is no longer something you're chasing, but something you're living. The old frequency drops away so completely that it's hard to remember why it ever felt like home. Your brain stops firing the old circuits and starts solidifying the new ones. You no longer have to try to think differently. It's simply your default. And here's the most beautiful part. The more you live as a conscious observer, the more effortless life becomes. You stop chasing signs and start becoming the signal. You stop waiting for reality to change and start realizing that you are the change. The field responds, not to your effort, but to your coherence. And coherence is the natural result of observation anchored in truth, in presence, in love. So as we close this journey, ask yourself, how will I observe my life today? Will I stare at my problems until they freeze into permanence? Or will I look with new eyes, with the willingness to see something different? Will I collapse the same old timeline? Or will I open to the infinite possibilities waiting in the field? The choice is yours. You are not a passive spectator. You are the observer, the architect, the creator. And every moment is a new opportunity to look again, to see differently, to collapse a new reality into form. If you're ready to live as a conscious observer, type in the comments, I choose to see with new eyes. Let this be your declaration, your signal to the field, your invitation to a new reality. Because in the end, the observer effect is not just about how reality changes when you look at it. It's about how you change when you realize you are the one looking. And that, more than anything, is the true power of being alive.